Limbus Company is a gacha game. In gacha games, the player has the ability to pull characters of different rarities, with the rarity often impacting said character's strength. And in Limbus, there are only 3 rarities: 1 star, 2 stars and 3 stars. 1 star is reserved for our starting LCB sinners, while 2 and 3 star units are the identities you can find on banners in the gacha. Or rather, could find. See, back in Season 5, Kim Ji-hoon, the CEO of Project Moon, announced the planned end of 2-star identities, and the man stuck to his word, as Season 6 came and went without even one 2-star identity being released. However, I believe 2 stars hold a certain beauty. Some of these identities, through the powers of gimmicks and effect infliction, carve out spots for themselves in teams and strategies, despite their low numbers. And now that we can see that this truly is the end for the red rarity, what better time is there to talk about the best 2-star identities Limbus Company has to offer? In this video, I want to go over what I consider to be the best 2 stars in the game, briefly going over what exactly makes them strong and how to use them efficiently in their preferred team compositions. But before we start, I have to remind you that most of my viewers are not subscribed, so if you find yourself coming back to my videos or end up enjoying this one, consider subscribing. It takes just 1 second and helps me out a lot. Now let's get to the video. I will be splitting up the identities I want to talk about into 2 groups. The actually insane group, consisting of the 2 stars that you should absolutely have on your account and you should use for their teams, as they're better than many newer and more expensive options, and the good group, with all the units that shine in hyper-specific setups or can act as side grades for their compositions. And the first identity I want to highlight is none other than LCCB Ishmael, the unit that should pop up in your head whenever you hear the words good 2-star identity. Ishmael is technically a Tremor Rupture unit, but she is a lot better in Tremor than she is in Rupture. The reason for that is her insanely overtuned skill 2. Quake Rounds is a skill that inflicts a total of 16 tremor and 4 tremor count with its coins, jumpstarting the tremor stack incredibly efficiently. And as it is a skill 2, you get to use it twice in a row, which means that in just 2 turns, one 2-star identity can provide you with a third of the maximum tremor stack on the enemy. But wait, there's more. Ishmael's skill 2 also has the Gloom affinity, a highly contested resource in Tremor, which is used to fuel both Cavernous Wailing Honglu and Everlasting Faust, the 2 crucial Tremor ego skills. And as the cherry on top, Ishmael gets a burst on her skill 3, allowing her to briefly cash in on the insane tremor stack she helped create, dealing up to a spread of 200 to 600 damage, with all damaging tremor types entangled. The only weak part of this ID's kit is her skill 1, which doesn't really do anything. This does mean that Ishmael gets weaker whenever she is forced to play out her entire skill set, but the immense power of her skill 2 can carry her value even in longer fights. And when I say carry, I mean it. LCCB Ishmael's slot is contested by Zwei and Hanafuda, 2 critically acclaimed Tremor identities with good offensive and defensive capabilities, as well as a lot of bursts. LCCB, the launch 2-star, is better than both, in 90% of boss fights. As it turns out, bursting a lot is something that isn't exclusive to Zwei and Hanafuda, and a lot of other IDs on Tremor do the exact same thing very effectively. And every burst's value scales off of the amount of tremor on the enemy, which means that the insane tremor infliction of this identity, increasing the power of the whole team's bursts, is far more valuable than adding a couple more bursts into an already large pool. Combine that with Ishmael's Gloom generation, which her other identities simply cannot contest, and you've got yourself a timeless core tremor unit for just 150 ego shards. That makes all manners of low turn clears possible by providing insane amounts of value on her own. For our next shining example of an incredible 2-star, we're jumping almost exactly 2 years into the future, as it's time to look at the event-exclusive identity of LCE Ego Lantern Yi-Sang. Yi-Sang is a very unique identity in Limbus company, as while every other unit wants to stay on the field and provide value with their skills and passives, Yi-Sang has one simple goal: to die in a teal blaze of glory. LCE Yi-Sang's passive allows him to inflict 5 Rapture and 3 Rapture count against the enemy that killed him, while also providing a whopping total of 8 ego resources to boot. Better yet, the Rapture potency application jumps up to 10 if Yi-Sang has Fairy Lure, making his death even more impactful than many skill 3s in the overpowered Rapture team. To use all this uniqueness effectively, Yi-Sang is best kept at a very low level, ideally level 1. With the extremely low health from underleveling, Yi-Sang gets to die on the second turn consistently. The reason why you want him to die on turn 2 is because his passive is doing the heavy lifting here, and it requires 3 Gluttony owned, meaning it's impossible to activate it on turn 1 outside of encounters where you get to carry over your resources. But fret not, as Yi-Sang's skills are not too bad, so he can get value turn 1 as well. His skill 2 specifically goes +1 in count, and if you can manage to lose a clash with the skill without getting staggered, the count infliction jumps up all the way to +3. On turn 2, just get Fairy Lure from his skill 3 or counter, and Yi-Sang is ready for his demise, which just so happens to greatly benefit your team. Much like LCCB Ishmael, this Yi-Sang identity fights for its spot against 2 other Rapture Yi-Sangs, Warp Corp and Wu Branch. And despite the caliber of his competition, Lantern still holds up quite well. He's the prime pick for Refraction Railway, where the extra ego resource generation enables more ego usage for faster clear times. And against story boss fights, he can also perform really well, especially when you combine him with the Heisho identities and their lord, allowing the unit that replaces Yi-Sang to get a free skill 3 in, providing more Rapture infliction, Rapture procs, and even more ego resources. The one issue this unit faces is the fact that winning gives you EXP, and EXP increases your level, meaning you only get a limited amount of uses for this identity before his level gets too high to die on turn 2 consistently. Luckily, there's a way around that as well. Using an LCE Yi-Sang through support allows you to kamikaze bomb as many bosses as you want, and the borrowed identity will not get upgraded, unless the original owner messes up. Next up, we're running right back to the launch of Limbus Company, and with it, yet another overtuned status inflictor, Kurokumo Clan Wakashu Honglu. This identity is a unit that I've briefly talked about before in my complete guide to Bleed, but honestly, I don't think I've given him enough screen time in that one, because Kurokumo Honglu is an early game beast. This identity specializes in bleed potency infliction, and his 3 main tools for that are his skills, his passive, and the Dark Cloud effect. First off, his skills. Cleave inflicts 3 bleed, which is not too shabby for a skill 1, while getting the last affinity, which is quite important in bleed. Cloud Cutter is a skill that requires no introduction. 2 coins and 3 bleed, which turn into 4 coins and 6 bleed if the enemy has less than 4 bleed count. While the reuse effect is anti-synergetic with the win condition of bleed, you can still brute force it by using Sanguine Desire Rodion on turn 1 through Superbia, allowing the bleed stack to live without stacking up a bunch of count early. It also gets the Pride affinity, which is useful for ego fueling on the bleed team. And then Cloudburst inflicts 6 bleed, but does so when hitting heads, meaning it can be inconsistent. Sloth is also not really a sin you need in bleed, so this skill is arguably the least impactful one, although it does have a dumb amount of paralyze, which makes sure that the enemy's next attack low rolls like crazy. Honglu's passive requires 3 Last Resonance, and it simply inflicts 3 bleed for free every turn. It does so with the final coin of the final skill in the chain. With just the skills and the passive, Kurokumo Honglu's bleed infliction already looks juicy, with his potency hitting 6 to 7 every turn, with the possibility of a 9 potency Cloud Cutter as well, if you get the reuses. But ever since the rerun of the Yield My Flesh to Claim Their Bones event in Season 5, there's been another force propelling Honglu into relevancy, and that force is none other than Kurokumo clan captain Ishmael. See, Ishmael is designed to be a leader identity that makes older Kurokumos more potent as unit options. The main way she does that is through Dark Cloud, an effect that provides a plethora of bonuses that go hand in hand with the outdated coin rolls of the Kurokumo clan. But the part that interests us the most is this: inflict 1 more of bleed effects with base attack skill coins. This effect works on both potency and count, and in the case of Honglu, it's a consistent boost to his bleed application, allowing him to inflict 1 to 2 more potency in most cases, and a whopping +4 if you get the reuse Cloud Cutter. The activation condition for Dark Cloud application lies in Last Resonance, which coincides with Honglu's own passive, and is directly facilitated by his skill 1, allowing this seemingly outdated 2-star launch identity to seamlessly integrate into the modern bleed team. Honglu's best use cases are bosses that you can kill quickly, think Lei Heng and the like, as his lightning quick bleed infliction adds up to a lot of true damage early, but eventually gets outscaled by ramp up identities and their physical damage if you let the fight drag on. If you ever feel like your bleed stack in story encounters ramps up too slowly, give Honglu a shot. He's cheap and he's very effective. One thing to note though, his rolls are quite bad, meaning you'll have to go unopposed, and potentially take some chip damage elsewhere. But with the amount of healing the bleed team gets, that's not an issue as long as you keep your resistances in mind. Moving on to my final entry in the awesome tier, we have a 2-star from Season 4, Wuthering Heights Butler Faust. Faust is the prime example of a 2-star that mimics a more powerful 3-star. In her case, the second half of this equation is Butler Otis, and both of these identities are sinking units with access to what is arguably the most important part of any sinking team: the Echoes of the Manor effect. Echoes are a panic type changing effect unique to these 2 identities. And 1 ego. What it does is quite simple. Every time the enemy that has this effect is inflicted with sinking potency or count due to skill or coin effects, there's a 50% chance for 1 extra point of count to be applied on top of that. There's more to this effect, but it doesn't really matter, as the first line is the biggest power boost. Simply having Echoes of the Manor on a boss is often the deciding factor between keeping or losing your sinking stack when playing for butterflies. Similarly, Deluge benefits greatly as well, as extra count leads to a larger overall stack, which results in a more powerful explosion of sadness. But Echoes aren't exclusive to Faust, so what makes her still good? Well, when I called her a weaker butler Otis, I kind of lied to you a little bit. While Faust is certainly not stronger than Otis in a traditional sense, she is differently specialized. While Otis mostly focuses on inflicting potency with her skills, Faust's skill 2 goes positive in count, increasing the more important half of the stack, while her potency application does not lag behind as much as many people think, due to her passive allowing Faust to inflict 3 sinking upon winning a clash against an enemy with Echoes. Utilizing Faust as your Echo setter also opens up the Otis slot, which has recently received the LCA Ujet Identity, a unit with some nice sinking infliction you can combine with Faust to create a large sinking stack for Spicebush, as well as other value. I'm not the biggest fan of Faust outside of Deluge teams, but if you have Ujet Otis already and are looking to fill out your sinking team, going for the cheaper Butler Faust instead of the more expensive Butler Otis is a great decision, at least in the short term, as you both get access to the all-important effect and get to keep using your new Otis. Speaking of short terms, the one thing you need to be careful with when using Faust is the fact that her Echoes of the Manor last for one less turn than Otis's, meaning you'll need to capitalize on the effect quickly, which decreases consistency. This concludes the highest tier of 2-star identities. LCCB Ishmael, LCE Yisang, Kurokumo Honglu, and Butler Faust are all units that are worth picking up if you want to make powerful teams, despite their low rarity. But the art of the 2-star does not conclude with this quartet, and there's a whole second tier of good and niche identities that I want to rapid fire through. Rien Otis is an identity with a lot of bleed count in one skill. Her skill 2, Sanguine Painting, gets reuses in the same way as Rien Yisang, the 3-star version of this unit. But, unlike him, Otis inflicts 5 whole bleed count with the skill, with no RNG involved, as long as you can guarantee all the reuses. The rest of her kit is kinda meh, with her skills 1 and 3, as well as her passive, inflicting some potency, while she can provide lust for resonance with her skill 1 and defense. Rien Otis's main use case is against bosses with lots of coins, primarily when you're not using Sanguine Desire. And while it is still better to spend a bit more on the ego, she can be a good answer for any kind of self-imposed challenges. And if you get her early on into the process of making your bleed team, Rien Otis can actually get some mileage until you land on that perfect composition. T-Corp Rodion is the only 2-star identity in the game with access to Time Moratorium. This effect is a niche but powerful tool that stores up all of your damage and then applies it as one big burst of sloth damage once its duration runs out, while adding a boost on top. Time Moratorium is often seen as a tremor adjacent mechanic. However, in the case of Rodion, her value comes from being able to apply the effect with her skill 3 after using her guard, without needing to rely on tremor on the enemy. This lets Rodia bring the sloth damage nuke to any team, allowing you to capitalize on sloth weaknesses with the damage from the rest of your team for the price of one identity slot. The only reason she's not in the top tier is that Moratorium itself is not in tip-top shape, as a lot of enemies and bosses in currently relevant game modes Either have a sloth resistance, which greatly cripples the effect, health gates, which prevent you from being able to nuke down bosses, or both. Oh, and T-Corp Otis can kinda do the same thing as well, so Rodion is no longer unique. Middle Merceau is up next, and this guy is part of your Charge Envy composition. The Charge Envy team is composed of, surprise surprise, a Charge side and an Envy side, and Middle Merceau works as a support for both. His mere presence on the field allows Middle Apprentice Ishmael and Middle Little Brother Sinclair to get more value out of their passives, all the while Merceau's own passive provides those allies with extra sanity, allowing them to keep up despite them playing mainly around counters. Merceau's skills buff up the power and damage of Envy skills as well, allowing him to contribute directly to the team's damage output without actually dealing much damage himself. As for the charge support part, it comes down to his egos, more specifically Electric Screaming. This skill is very cheap in Charge Envy, and it's quite effective. 2 Envy damage up based on Envy Resonance is exactly the kind of effect that the team loves, and the team-wide charge gain keeps your charge users topped up. With the ego's innate power and the value that the identity brings, Middle Merceau remains a good option for Envy Resonance, even if he's not a priority pick. And while it's true that he can be power crept in the future quite easily, his support passive will still provide great amounts of bonus SP, allowing many identities to clash much more consistently on many teams, not just Charge Envy. On the topic of Charge Envy, Multicrack Heathcliff is another support type identity for the team. His value comes from inflicting debuffs on the enemy, namely Blunt Fragility, Defense Level Down, and Photoelectricity. The first two are self-explanatory. They increase the damage of Heathcliff's allies, which is quite valuable on a team filled with identities that have nothing but physical damage. Photoelectricity, however, is an effect that's unique to Multicrack Heathcliff, and it allows his allies to gain charge count when hitting the enemy, getting even more if their current charge count is really low. Couple all that with haste from his passive to make the debuffs more consistent, an Envy defense and a couple of Envy ego skills, including Move in Reg, and you've got yourself a good charge support identity that can buff up your middles too, similarly to Middle Merceau. Lantern Dawn is a fantastic comfort pick for Rapture. She's got a count positive skill 1, a count neutral skill 2, and a count neutral skill 3. Her coin count is not too bad, and she's got access to the Red Sheet ego skill if you need some extra damage out of her slot. While Rapture has evolved to a point where almost only Heishos are allowed to survive, as long as you're going for optimal fast clears, the team still relies heavily on resetting the initial turns until you get a favorable rotation to execute said fast clear. However, if that's not really your style, higher consistency identities might entice you more, and Lantern Dawn is exactly that, while also being cheap. Sometimes even I find myself using her on the Rapture team if I want to test something out, as replacing count negative identity number 67 with Dawn is a great way to make sure you have access to a decent Rapture stack quickly without needing to glue yourself to the reset stage button. Is she optimal? No, not really. But she is cheap and convenient, and that's exactly how some players like it. Dawn's only drawback is that she's locked behind Walpurgisnacht, but Kim Ji-hoon did say we're going to get more of those going forward, and the next one is literally the next banner at the time of making this video, so look into Lantern Dawn if you haven't already. Remnant Faust is another one of those release identities that should by all means not be alive today, but here she is, with exactly one niche where she shines. Faust's damage is low, her clashing is only good once per rotation, and her effect infliction is non-existent. So where's the value? Well, one thing that Remnant does well is haste, and her skill 2 gives a whopping total of 4, bringing her speed roll from a low 3 to 6 to a very respectable 7 to 10. A fast Faust might not seem like a threat on her own, but equip her with the Everlasting Ego skill and she's got enough utility to carry a Tremor team low turn clear. Everlasting applies Amplitude Entanglement into Tremor Everlasting, which basically means that all the Tremor bursts that go after it for one turn get Omega buffed. I'm simplifying here, and I have a full guide to Tremor if you want to learn more, but the gist of it is that the effect is extremely good and allows following bursts to get much more value. Which means using it as early as possible is a priority. This is the same logic that makes Mao Faust meta in Tremor, but that idea is currently unshardable. And, even more importantly than that, many people just hate using her anywhere, as she's insanely strong to an unfun degree. And while Remnant is not exactly at the Adept's level, she does provide an ace in the hole in the form of extra Gloom generation, which can be potentially useful. Overall, Remnant Faust is a mini Mao Faust for the Tremor team specifically. And as much as that sentence might sound schizophrenic, it's actually true. So if you're one of those people with an anti-Maust mental block, or if you simply don't have her, yet you possess dreams of nuking people with Tremor, Remnant, surprisingly, is a viable option. Okay, who the fuck am I lying to? There's not a single person in the world in that position. I just wanted to talk about Remnant being the Tremor mini-Maust, because it's really funny. Anyways, 7 Association Ryoshu is a similarly extremely niche 2-star that can still see some use in specific strategies. All of her value comes from her skill 3, so she's one of those reset heavy identities. But that value is quite great. Swash is a skill that inflicts a huge total of 5/fragility on the following turn if it wins a clash, allowing any unit with high physical slash damage to follow up for an insane amount of damage. This, of course, works extremely well with Mao Faust and Lord Honglu, as the Lord allows Heisho identities to capitalize insanely well on one turn of vulnerability by providing them with extra skills, while Mao Faust is simply the premier slash damage dealer who just so happens to be a Heisho unit that gets all of these benefits. Also, Swash is a gluttony skill, which lets it contribute to the activation of Mao Faust's passive, making this synergy just perfect. Again though, I'm not telling you that 7 Ryoshu should be placed alongside other Heishos for this. But certain low turn strategies make use of Swash very efficiently, and I felt like bringing this up. And just like this, we've gone through some of the best 2-star identities Limbus company has to offer, from the units that can rival 3 stars to extremely niche identities that can still find use cases all these years after their release. And honestly, there are even more 2-star units that aren't completely useless. Many of them are in no way capable of actually contesting their superiors, but they fall into the suitable downgrade subsection, providing actual value, just not as much of it as the newer and more expensive identities. And, to tell the truth, I missed that. The lost art of 2-star identities is something I look back on fondly, despite what some people might expect of me, with my reputation being the meta-slave YouTuber and all. Units rolling lower than usual, yet finding places for themselves in teams, has always been fun to witness, as they use the effects and gimmicks to carve out niches, instead of entering the all-consuming damage race, which a 2-star identity cannot hope to win. Funnily enough, the spirit of the 2-star still lives on through identities like Thumb Sinclair and Index Faust, units with watered-down mechanics compared to their superiors. But it really isn't the same. The past half a year or so of identities is honestly blending together. So many units with low effect infliction and high physical damage coming to every team, and a complete lack of that one unit that deals fuck all damage but absolutely juices the stack. The loss of this design doctrine can be partially attributed to mirror dungeons becoming a form of endgame content, as it's really hard to sell someone like LCCB Ishmael to a player that's used to the effects on the enemy becoming maxed out after just one glance in their general direction. It's not just MD though. Lower rarity units simply generate less revenue, while requiring the same amount of time and effort to produce. And I get that discontinuing them is probably optimal for Project Moon as a company, but isn't that the case for every gacha game? Yet they keep making more of these common units instead of throwing in the towel. Honestly, it's unfortunate that this decision has been made, as it lines the pockets of Project Moon while the players keep on receiving the same damage-oriented kits again and again, instead of getting an occasional glimpse of a niche identity that they could get their hands on for cheap. Am I dooming too much? Maybe, but I really want 2 stars back. But what about you? Do you want this rarity to come back stronger than ever, or are you fine with it being put to rest? Make sure to drop down to the comment section to let me know. With this, my video on the best 2-star identities in Limbus company comes to an end. Some of these units are still ridiculously strong, surviving waves upon waves of power creep, while some are niche enough to a point where it's hard to replace them at all. I think the casual player should not sleep on the power of these units, as I see way too much hate towards units like LCE Jeong, when he's one of the best to ever do it. If you disagree with anything in the video, or if you have something to add, feel free to leave a comment below, and I might read it and respond. If you liked the video at any point, leave a like to let me know, and consider subscribing if you want to see more like this. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Goodbye!